Hi, I'm Ahmed Shahabuddin, and you're in the stream live on Al Jazeera and on YouTube. Today, we look at a life as an undocumented immigrant in the U.S. amid an immigration crackdown by the Trump administration. As U.S. President Donald Trump sends tweets saying the country is being, quote, stolen due to illegal immigration, life for 11 million undocumented immigrants is getting harder. Immigration arrests are at a 3-year high, and many non-criminal undocumented immigrants are among those being detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. Now, a new campaign by Brooklyn Defender Services and the American Civil Liberties Union aims to educate people on how to deal with ICE officers. Take a look.
It was 5:30 a.m. when ICE came to Esther's apartment. Stories like this happen every day and are happening now more than ever. ICE approaches people in the street, at work, in their car, or even in court. It's scary. But remember, we have rights.
For more on this campaign and the continued pressure undocumented immigrants face in the United States, I'm joined today by Scott Heckinger, I believe. He is Senior Staff Attorney and Director of Policy at Brooklyn Defender Services. That's one of the organizations leading the We Have Rights campaign. Khalil Cumberbatch is an Associate Vice President of Policy at the Fortune Society, an organization aimed at promoting alternatives to incarceration. He has firsthand experience of ICE officers knocking on his door, which he outlined in a recent article on the Marshall Project. In New York, we have Linda Sarsour. She is an activist and organizer. She voiced the Arabic language videos for the We Have Rights campaign. And joining us from Oakland, California is Adrian Reyna. He is co-founder of Notifica, a brand new app to alert key contacts if a person is at imminent risk of arrest and deportation. He also leads digital engagement for United We Dream, the largest immigrant youth-led community in the U.S. Thank you all for being with us. So much to discuss here. I want to start, though, Scott, by asking you, why did your organization feel the need to launch this actual campaign?
You know, We Have Rights is a national immigration empowerment campaign, and it was in direct response to expressed client need. At Brooklyn Defender Services, we represent upwards of 45,000 people a year, and our client base is as diverse as the country. We represent tons of immigrants and other folks in deportation proceedings, in criminal proceedings, family law, housing law, and they came to us in the wake of this 30% increase in arrests under the Trump administration, and came to us and told us about their concerns, their fear, what's happening to them. They came to us and said, look, do we have rights in the first place? And if we do, what are we supposed to do?
And I know that that's a question that many people wonder about, and I can imagine, Khalil, that it also applied to you. And I kind of want to know, what do you wish you knew now, or knew back then, I should say, that you know now?
Yeah, so one of the major things I wish that I knew back then that I know now is just the main fact that I didn't have to open the door. For someone who has had involvement in the criminal justice system, seeing the police at your door automatically warrants a level of anxiety for obvious reasons. But here I was as someone who was a quote-unquote law-abiding citizen, someone who didn't have anything to hide. And so when the police showed up at my door saying that they were there to conduct an investigation, because I didn't have anything to hide, my natural inclination was to let them in. And that's something that I wish I knew then that I know now.
And can you actually tell us what happened between the time that they knocked on your door, sat on your couch, and then that you were getting booked and processed?
Yeah, so they came around 7 a.m. I was in the process of getting my daughters ready for their day at school, my wife and I. They knocked on the door and said that they were there to ask a few questions about an investigation that they were actively undergoing, and could they ask me a few questions inside. And so my wife and I let them into our residence, and while we were sitting on our couch is when they told us that they were there from Department of Homeland Security, particularly Immigration Customs Enforcement. And within an hour, I was whisked away in 4 unmarked vehicles, headed downtown Manhattan to 26 Federal Plaza. And within 30 minutes of after arriving at 26 Federal Plaza, I was told that I would be held indefinitely. that I did not have a chance to be issued any bond because of my criminal conviction. And within the next 6 hours, I was in Hudson County Jail in Kearney, New Jersey.
And that kind of, just so you know, that kind of story, that experience of ICE actually coming to someone's door, saying, not identifying themselves at the outset as ICE, claiming that they're there just to investigate or maybe to help someone out inside. These are really common occurrences. And so the 4 films track 4 of the most common encounters with ICE. What to do when ICE is at your door, what to do when ICE is inside your home, what to do when ICE approaches you and your community when you're arrested by ICE. And the characters on film are not, they're based on true stories. There's no Esther, but there are 1,000 Esthers.
Of course, and it's not just, I hear, Linda Sarsour, you're nodding, and I see Adrian as well. Before we broaden the conversation out, I do want to mention, we actually have a tweet here from Rational Thinker. A lot of people bringing up these questions. Does ICE need sufficient evidence to be able to detain those people they suspect as illegal immigrants? Do people suspected as illegal immigrants have the same rights as American citizens? Now, I want to kind of clarify things before we go in. Adrian, I see you're shaking your head, but I want to note that we approached ICE to ask how they ensure the rights of people they interact with are protected. The agency said this: ICE is committed to ensuring that all of those who are subject to removal from the United States under our laws receive the full process they are due while in removal proceedings in ICE custody. Everyone in ICE custody for removal proceedings receives Know Your Rights presentations, detainee handbooks, and access to telephones to contact attorneys, consulates, and legal aid organizations, and are apprised of free legal service providers that may be available to assist with their cases. Now, beyond that being a mouthful that I just got out there, I do want to ask you, Khalil, was that true? Did they do that
So
for
that
you?
was not true in my case, but let's just assume that that it is true, that ICE actually does take all of those precautions and actually gives people know your rights information after you've been in custody. The fact that they give it to you after you're in custody is null and void, right? I would have loved to have a Know Your Rights presentation at my doorstep.
Right.
I would have loved to know that you do not have to open a door. Here is a warrant that we may or may not have. Here's the difference between the warrants that we may or may not have. And in that moment, being able to make a well-informed decision, but the reality is that giving it to someone after you have them in custody is actually irrelevant.
And Linda, I just want to come to you because I know that you live in one of the largest immigrant communities. You're in South Brooklyn. I'm familiar with your work. I know you've come across this. Why is this campaign so important, and what do you make of what we've heard so far in this conversation?
For me, I've done a lot of work, as you know, for the past 16 years in a post-9/11 America, in particular with Arab immigrants, Muslims, and Muslim Americans and Muslim immigrants in a community that has been targeted by every level of law enforcement, including ICE. And this probably is the most important project I've ever been a part of, ensuring that the communities that I come from know their rights and understand that they don't have to open the door. And you know this, Ahmed, as Arabs, as Muslims, we have this sense of hospitality that sometimes is to our detriment. And when we have officers, engaging in trying to interact with us at the door, we invite them in, we're trying to offer them tea and coffee. And these are actually real life stories that I have heard and encountered within the clients that I have served over the past 16 years. And knowing that once a law enforcement agent, whether it's ICE or NYPD or FBI, once they are in your home, you have given them free reign at that moment. And this is something that is very basic information for everybody, whether you are an immigrant, whether you are undocumented or American. These videos that have been put forth by Brooklyn Defender Services and the ACLU, in fact, are helpful to all of us. They actually, in my opinion, could help Americans who are being targeted by levels of law enforcement, or if an FBI agent comes to your home, you have every right to ask for a warrant. You have every right to ask for an attorney at that moment. And our community, the 30% increase in arrests, in fact, is impacting the communities that I come from.
Right.
Like hundreds of Muslims across the country. Recently in Ohio, we had an upstanding citizen, Palestinian immigrant who has been here for 40 years, was a business owner, was a great asset to his community. The members of Congress went with him to his check-in appointment, and he was detained and then eventually deported back to Jordan. In Queens, Pakistani cab drivers who have children who are sick, and a chemistry teacher out in Kansas City. I mean, every day we're hearing story after story of our communities being terrorized by ICE. These are not the priority people that we should be detaining at this moment. And it actually has psychological warfare amongst those who may not ever be in contact with ICE, but the fact that they leave
Right.
their homes every day thinking that there's an opportunity for them to be stopped by an ICE agent in the street is sending a lot of fear in the communities we come from.
And that fear manifests itself, as you know, and as we all know, whether you have firsthand or experience or not, in many different ways. Adrian, I saw you were nodding as Linda was outlining some of those points. I want to come to you, but first, Kent chiming in saying the best thing to do is to record what is happening. In this way, you have documentation of what the situation is, and you can use it for your defense. Now, I don't know if that's good legal advice, but Adrian, your reaction to what you've heard so far?
I mean, I'm just really upset reading and listening to the statement from ICE. I'm undocumented. I have a lot of family members who have had to put up with this in the past. And the truth is that even though we have rights, we cannot rely on the federal government at this point to respect them. And so what we really need to do is ensure that our communities know that not only do they have rights, they have power within our communities to ensure that we stop this once and for all. And the only way that we're going to do that is by organizing each other. The truth is that when ICE comes to someone's door, we know from members that they will stand outside, they will use every tactic possible to intimidate people into opening the door, they will stake outside and wait for our people to go outside. And the reality is that this is what enabled us to build technology to ensure that people are planning for those scenarios and that they're building the defense mechanisms in their communities so that there can be people outside, that there can be people ready to be mobilized to stop this.
And speaking of being ready, obviously that's why you've developed this app that we're going to discuss in just a minute. But first, I do want to point out, that it was under President Obama that we did see more people deported than any other administration. And yet, what's interesting is that there was an executive order that President Trump signed that expanded ICE's focus to most immigrants, even those without a criminal record. Now, arrests declined during the latter years of the Obama administration, despite it being the administration that's deported more people than any other administration. But ICE was ordered during the Obama administration to prioritize the arrest of those with serious criminal records. But following Trump's executive order, immigration arrests were up in 2017 by 30% from the previous year. You see it right there. Just those numbers, how does that actually factor in? Because a lot of people don't understand what is happening, what the shift has been since the previous administration. On Twitter, Q Photo NYC saying, where are people swept by ICE being held? In what conditions? Are they able to communicate? Have any citizens been swept by error? How have things shifted?
Things have shifted in terms of not only the numbers increasing by 30%, but who ICE is actually targeting. They're not just folks with serious violent felonies. These are not the criminal legal aliens that Trump tweets about. These are not just undocumented people. These are people with green cards, people seeking asylum, refugees. And within the undocumented population, there's a broad range. You have folks who have been here for 26 years with 3 American citizen children who've been paying taxes the entire time they've been there. But the thing that's important for people to know is whether you have a criminal record or not, whether you're undocumented, whether you have status, you have rights under the Constitution. The problem with the Trump administration's, the way he's been talking about illegal immigration and undocumented folks, is that undocumented has come to mean unprotected. When the truth is that one of the great things about our American Constitution going back 129 years with the 14th Amendment and Supreme Court case law is that you are protected if you're inside the country. And the Bill of Rights and the Constitution applies to you as well.
And Khalil, I see you nodding. And Linda, go ahead. Why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, to your question about also the conditions, or to the question of the person who tweeted, that this is a very important conversation to have. One of the things that the American people need to know is that these detention centers are being operated by private companies. And there are people that are profiting off of the detention of immigrants in our community, similarly to our mass incarceration and our prison industrial complex. So the fact that people are profiting off of this actually encourages agencies and contractors to see more of these arrests. So somebody's benefiting from this. And then the conditions that they are put in is absolutely outrageous. I remember a few years ago going to Elizabeth, New Jersey detention center with a client of mine, or with a wife of someone who was detained. The minute I walked into the doors, it smelled like urine in there. It's not sanitary. Oftentimes people have to fight to get access to medical care. Most recently under this administration, they actually now are putting aside an executive order or some sort of regulation or rule that where we would not be detaining pregnant women, and apparently now we're going to be detaining pregnant women. So what I want people to know, it's not just about immigrants and whether they have rights. They're human beings, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And even in their detention, they are treated less than human by private contractors who are running for-profit businesses by detaining these immigrants.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Linda, because AJ Plus actually went to one of those facilities. I mean, for those who don't know, thousands of undocumented immigrants are currently held in detention. Some have been held behind bars for years, while they actually wait for a court hearing. So it can take a toll, as we just heard Linda outline, both mentally and physically. And my colleague Dina Takruri learned this firsthand last year when reporting for AJ Plus. Take a look at this.
Immigrant detention can not only be heartbreaking, but also debilitating. Eloy is run by the private for-profit company CoreCivic, formerly known as CCA. The detention center has come under fire for spoiled food, poor health care, and the highest number of detainee deaths in the country. Rigo spent over a year in Eloy, and he's still haunted by the experience.
Tenía mi próstata inflamada, 5 meses no me atendieron, hasta que llegó el término de que no podía salir a orinar, hasta que me operaron. Cada que voy al baño que no puedo orinar así, me acuerdo de Eloy.
Now, Khalil, you know, he's haunted by that experience. I know that you personally have described ICE as a shadow organization. We've heard it described as a vigilante organization by others. What do you mean by that? And watching that, how do you react?
Yeah, so one, I agree with everything that Linda said and that the gentleman described, that the conditions in the facilities that are managed by ICE are deplorable. They are quasi-jail conditions, and for people who allegedly are not charged with any crime and therefore do not warrant any punishment, they are punished merely because they exist in these facilities, merely to, as you said, to just await a court date. The second thing I would add is that yes, privatizing prisons and jails is one aspect of it, but the privatization of commissary, phone calls, all of that is actually built into the system, even if you're not in a private facility, because ICE does have publicly funded facilities where they hold people while they're facing deportation proceedings. That privatization is innately built into all of that. And then the third point is that I've referred to ICE in the past as a clandestine organization, because although they are funded publicly, there's much information that we actually do not know about ICE. We do not know the granular details that actually will expose some of the most atrocious acts that they've done, particularly when going into people's homes. People, as Linda mentioned, view their homes as sanctities, and the mere fact that you have armed people in your home is actually a violation of that sanctity. And if you are forced on the ground and have children zip-tied and have explosive devices used, that can only add to further trauma.
And if I could step in, one of the reasons why a lot of this is swept under the rug is there's actually no recognized right to counsel in deportation proceedings. Brooklyn Defender Services is one of very few organizations that get funded to actually provide free legal representation, and only by being able to speak with clients, find out what happened in their particular situation in interaction with ICE, and find out more about the conditions in real time, can we actually illuminate and bring this to light.
And that's maybe where, Adrian, you know, the app comes in, and a lot of the questions and comments that are coming in are on this issue. For example, Mama Paloma saying under 45, this is under President Trump, of course, the uncertainty and fear has intensified, kind of echoing what you guys have been saying, further isolating an entire class of people, strengthening the position of criminal organizations to control them. ICE on one side and the mafia on the other, often with reach back home. Now, I want to ask you, Adrian, I mean, you know, building on some of these campaigns, like We Have Rights and advocates for undocumented immigrants have considered maybe the role of technology. How can it assist those targeted by ICE raids? So we want to share a little preview of what Notifica actually does. It's this app that launched just last week. Here's how it works.
Introducing Notifica, the first mobile app designed to help before, during, and after an immigration raid. First, Notifica helps by clearly explaining your legal rights. Notifica then prompts you for the people you want to message in the event you are detained. Notifica also connects you with an advocacy group, United We Dream, and a community for longer-term support. So if the unthinkable does happen, you don't have to panic. You just have to push a button, and in real time, Notifica seamlessly puts your plan into action, alerting your loved ones and immediately starting your legal defense, all via your pre-planned text messages.
Seems really effective to me. Adrian, why did you create this?
So we created Notifica because, one, we knew that it was really important to ensure that people have the tools necessary to get their plans of defense in action. And so this includes attorneys, community members, community organizers that know the ins and outs of how to mobilize and stop a deportation. In the past, we've known that the only way to really make that happen is through preparation. And so people need to have tough conversations with family members, with neighbors, with people at work, at your school. And so Notifica is a tool to enable people to do that. Earlier the issue was brought up about people being sent to detention. I have so many transgender friends, right, who get detained and are unable to get in communication with someone once they're being put in detention, and they cannot be given their medication and stuff. And so our goal is that with Notifica, we can also tackle the issues, right, that we don't hear about, right, of people needing medication, people that have family members who need medication, and they're the ones that are taking care of them, right? How do they ensure that all of those things are in place, but also that there is a plan that enables people to stop this and delay it as much as possible?
And Adrian, as you were outlining that, I mean, it's interesting because it seems as though there are shifts that are happening that are maybe more discreet. And Linda, I'd be curious, in your experience, almost 2 decades of doing this kind of work, what have you noticed maybe between local law enforcement and how they're involved with ICE? Is there anything that worries you?
Absolutely. I mean, I just witnessed recently at the arrest of Ravi Ragbir, which is one of our colleagues and has been a longtime organizer here in New York City, who's also undocumented. When he went into his check-in appointment, we did a solidarity rally outside of 26 Federal Plaza. And, these were interfaith leaders, people from different faith communities. Many of them were senior citizens. And I saw exactly what I knew was happening all along. And oftentimes our government leaders lie to us and say, well, our local law enforcement does not work directly with ICE, or we are a sanctuary city. But I literally saw Department of Homeland Security officers and NYPD officers together on the streets of New York City. We have these pictures documented. City council members are calling for an investigation and a hearing where NYPD and Department of Homeland Security were actually arresting protesters who were standing up for Ravi Ragbir. So here we are in New York City, and we're supposed to be a liberal and progressive city. We tell everyone, follow our lead, we're sanctuary.
Right.
When in fact, it was reinforced to me once again that even here in New York City, we are not a sanctuary city.
And Linda, obviously the reality on the ground, which is why we're doing this show, whether in New York City or elsewhere in the country, is often different than we might imagine or what have you. And one of our online community members is actually a student in New York. She is one of Scott's clients as well. She says a special training session has given her essential advice on what to do if she encounters an ICE officer. Take a listen.
I think that there is fear. However, I feel more prepared if my family or myself encounter any sort of situation with ICE. We have a family plan such as saving money, reaching out to people, and if we ever face any sort of situation with them. More importantly, I know that I have rights despite being undocumented, and it has empowered me in many ways, especially when I do not fear arrest.
Scott, what do you make of that?
Well,
how critical?
Knowing your rights is so critical, and actually this client was extremely helpful in us creating this project. She, along with lots of other clients of ours from a wide variety of backgrounds and immigration statuses, came and did a focus group to figure out what language would be most accessible, understandable, and actually speak to us about even what the characters would look like so they could actually relate to them. These stories we're hearing about more and more, but what she did say that is encouraging is that, well, it's not encouraging. It's unfortunate that we even have to be having this conversation, but she's at least taking affirmative action and proactive action with her families to be prepared. Right now, being prepared is unfortunately where we're at. That's what's critical.
And that knowledge, where she said just not having that fear of arrest and how that's, freedom in of itself, or at least freedom from that fear, is quite powerful. Thank you all for joining us. That's all from us here on the stream today. But this conversation will definitely continue. Be sure to be part of that. Keep the conversation going on Twitter, YouTube, and aljazeera.com/thestream. Thanks for being with us.